Taimur Baig, of course, is the Chief Economist, Asia Global Markets Research at Deutsche Bank. And Taimur, it's a double delight in the macro front. The core sector data has grown. The fiscal deficit has shrunk. Seems like we're in a good place right now.
Yes, I have to say, I admire your enthusiasm and the good vibe that is coming out of your studio. It's very rare, given what the mayhem that the entire emerging markets complex is going through right now. So, when I, sitting in Singapore, discuss Indonesia or Malaysia or Korea, it's all doom and gloom. So it's refreshing to discuss a couple of data points where there is indeed some glimmer of light as far as India is concerned. But I think we have to be realistic. It is a glimmer. It is not a bright ray of sunshine yet. Fiscal is improving, but we also have had 4 or 5 months of very poor income tax collection data. So the drag is still there. And also on the expenditure side, while the government has done pretty good in certain aspects in terms of pushing up infrastructure spending, there's a lot more work to be done. And of course, there's a very big risk for fiscal for the remainder of the year, which is disinvestment, where the government has an exceptionally ambitious agenda. But if you think about the things that are up for sale and the global appetite from investor side, particularly on the FII side, that'll be a tall order. So let's not push the positive data too much because we have been wrong as far as India is concerned repeatedly in the last year or so. The market has always voted with great deal of enthusiasm and touched onto every single uptake, only to be disappointed later on. And there's a very good reason for that. I mean, India does not exist in a vacuum. The global marketplace is an exceptionally challenging and difficult place right now. It is very difficult for a large EM economy to be an alpha in the middle of this mayhem. So expectations for India should be seen on a relative basis. On a relative basis, India is a great story. On an absolute term, in terms of the aspiration of the market, in terms of the aspiration of the Indian population, it is very likely to disappoint. So that juxtaposition of relative outperformance but absolute disappointment, I think, is going to remain a characteristic for India for the coming quarters.
Taimur, if I look at financial history, I've often seen that every country, every region enjoys its spot in the sun. 1980s it was Japan, followed by US in 1990s. China from 2000 to 2010. Could next 5 years really belong to India? I know it's a very optimistic view, it's a grand view, but maybe it could get, in only hindsight we'll figure out.
Well, I hope you're right, but there is a commonality between the 3 cases that you mentioned, which doesn't exist anymore, which is all of those 3 cases, the economies grew through exports. The global demand environment was favorable. So whether it is Japan or China, if you made stuff, people would buy the stuff. The question is, and this is what Governor Rajan pointed out in his speech late last year, who's going to buy the new stuff? Is it going to be that somehow China gives up on manufacturing, India takes up the helm? Or is it going to be that India makes some new stuff or more competitive stuff that the rest of the world buys? It's going to be very, very difficult. You see, the golden era of globalization, gains from trade, expansion of trade has more or less come to a standstill. In the past, we used to be, the global economy used to be characterized by 8 to 15% of trade volume growth every year. We're down to 2 to 3% now. And if you think about the demographic headwind in the Western economies, if you think about the slowdown of China, if you think about what's happening with the commodity-producing economies, which are a very big source of demand as well, you can easily see that growing through exports is going to be challenging. Mind you, year to date so far, in terms of exports performance, India is the worst in all of Asia. And that's reason for that is that a third of India's exports come from commodities, which is not something that is in the popular perception or understanding. And even the remainder part, it goes to countries in Africa and the Middle East, where now because of the commodity crash, there's been a huge adjustment in demand. So this is why I think when we talk about the next decade is going to be India's, maybe in relative terms, that even if India gets 5–6% growth and the rest of EM gets 2%, everybody will still flock to India to get growth. But can India do a Japan, which grew by 8–9% for 2–3 decades? Can it do a China, which grew by 9% for 3 decades? I have my misgivings.
Now, Taimur, that point is well taken, and I think Christine Lagarde probably put some color to that thought as well with her comments on the EM pact. But my question is simple. What happens over the next couple of years is a black box, primarily because of the kind of transition that China is going through. The question remains that in 2 years' time, in 1 year's time, or in 3 years' time, when the dust settles, India could well be first of the blocks.
One would hope so. There are 2 things to keep in mind. So one is, within the next couple of years, which country has the biggest upside as far as domestic demand is concerned. Now, if we didn't have the banking system drag right now in India, we could have easily said that'll be India. Indian consumers are young, they're aspirational, they're optimistic, and if you can provide a stable macro environment, they'll work hard, they'll consume a lot. The only problem is that, if they want to get loans, the banks seem to become a bit reluctant because they have huge amount of overhang from bad assets. But still, I think, compared to other economies which are now entering the pickup in bad loans, India is dealing with a legacy problem. I don't think on a marginal basis we'll see a big pickup in bank loans. And of course, with the RBI cutting rates and injecting liquidity, perhaps that would still support the consumption outlook in the next couple of years. What happens after that, when the world hopefully it looks a little better once the dust around China settles? Well, then there'll be other countries who will also become very competitive and attractive. So today, for example, nobody wants to touch a country like Brazil or Indonesia, but to think that they will remain in the doldrums 2 years from now might be expecting too much, because on a relative basis, they're also going through correction. Some of their valuations will also become attractive. So let's be clear. There is competition. There's competition for resources. There is also competition for demand. And right now, India has a nice window where its relative health is looking a little better. Global investors are interested in India. Now is the time to lay the reforms which will build the foundation for a stronger, more competitive, say, the second half of 2010s and beyond.
We'll leave it at that. For once, I do hope that you are partially wrong and we do get in a lion's share of the flows when the flows start coming in. But thanks for joining in today.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.